He called me legacy infrastructure. But there was something he didn't know: I was the only reason the company was still legally operating. They thought I was an outdated printer, but today I'm the one holding the only operating ticket, and I just tore it up. My name is Lena Brooks. I'm 39 years old, and, until recently, I was the head of compliance at Virelia Dynamics, a biotechnology company that had been my professional home for nearly 11 years. I'm not the type who craves attention or makes scenes in meetings. I'm the person who triple-checks documentation before submitting it, who remembers everyone's birthdays without Facebook reminders, and who knows every regulatory code by heart because someone has to. I designed our compliance systems from the ground up, and I held the only operating license related to all federal certifications. Not that anyone seemed to care about that detail. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. April rain tapped against my office window as I updated our quarterly audit documents. My small office, tucked away in the west wing of our sprawling facility, was my sanctuary. Plants lined the windowsill survivors I'd nursed through countless late nights. A wall of binders contained printed backups of every critical document, old-fashioned, perhaps, but I'd seen too many system crashes to trust digital storage alone. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. All staff introduction of interim CEO. Right? Gregory Lang, our longtime CEO, had taken a sabbatical to care for his wife during her cancer treatment. The board had brought in someone new to keep things running. I closed my files, straightened my navy blazer, and headed to the conference room. I should have known something was wrong when they announced it would be a Zoom meeting instead. Our company prided itself on in-person communication, Gregory's philosophy. But there he was on the projection screen, our new interim CEO, Tyler Voss. 34, with gelled hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. MBA from Harvard, former management consultant, described as a fixer for the leadership team. I'm thrilled to be joining the Virelia family, he said, adjusting his designer tie. I've spent the last week reviewing our operations, and I see tremendous potential for streamlining. My stomach tightened at that word. In my experience, streamlining was corporate speak for cutting people who couldn't immediately justify their existence in a spreadsheet. We need to identify legacy infrastructure and redundant processes. Tyler continued, his gaze sweeping across the room through the camera. Some of you are managing systems that may have been essential in the past, but need reevaluation in our current landscape. His eyes seemed to find mine through the screen when he said, legacy infrastructure. I smiled back placidly while my fingers moved across my keyboard, quietly backing up all operating license documentation to my personal drive. I renamed the file, Recipes, for Muffins. After the meeting, my colleague Diane stopped by my office. What did you think of Mr. Voss? She asked, leaning against my doorframe. Seems efficient, I replied, carefully neutral. Diane rolled her eyes. That's corporate robot for I hate him already, isn't it? She knew me too well. We'd started at Virelia around the same time, though she'd jumped departments twice while I'd built compliance from a one-person operation to a respected team of 5. He doesn't understand what we do here, I said finally. Biotechnology compliance isn't something you can just streamline without consequences. Well, he's temporary. Right, Gregory will be back in a few months. Diane smiled reassuringly. I nodded, but something felt off. The way Tyler had looked at me at my department like we were expenses to cut rather than safeguards to value. The next morning, an email arrived from Tyler's new executive assistant. Subject line, Department Reevaluation Initiative. All department heads were to submit detailed reports explaining their team's function, associated costs, and strategic alignment with core business objectives. The deadline was Friday, 3 days away. I spent those 3 days compiling a comprehensive justification for my department's existence. 11 years of building compliance infrastructure, maintaining relationships with federal regulators, and preventing millions in potential fines. I outlined how our department managed 38 distinct certifications and licenses that allowed Virelia to legally operate, research, and sell our products. On Friday afternoon, I submitted my report and waited. Monday morning. Tyler's response arrived. Thank you for your detailed report. Please attend the strategic realignment meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. The meeting was a bloodbath disguised as progress. Tyler stood at the head of the conference table, slides illustrating his vision for a leaner, more agile Virilia. After careful consideration, we'll be reallocating resources across several departments. He announced, compliance will be integrated with legal, with specialized functions distributed according to this chart. The organizational chart on screen showed my department dismantled, my 5 team members scattered across other departments, and my position replaced with a dotted line labeled Oversight from Legal. Lena, Tyler said, turning to me with practiced sympathy. You'll be transitioning to emergency supply management. I blinked. Excuse me. You'll oversee the first aid stations and emergency response equipment. Your attention to detail will be valuable there. My job, my entire professional identity reduced to checking bandage expiration dates. I felt eyes on me from around the table, waiting for my reaction. I simply nodded and typed a note on my tablet. Accept new role. Begin contingency planning. After the meeting, Tyler caught up with me in the hallway. Lena, I want you to know this isn't personal. The regulatory landscape has changed, and we need to adapt. Of course, I replied, my voice steady. Who will be handling our federal operating licenses? He waved dismissively. We're bringing in a consultant initially, then training someone from legal. Maya Patel, I believe. Maya was a first-year intern who had started 3 weeks ago, last Friday. She'd asked me what DEA stood for. I see, I said. Will there be a transition period? We're moving quickly on this. The changes take effect next Monday. Your team has already been notified of their new assignments. Without consulting me, without even the courtesy of letting me tell them myself. Is there anything else? I asked. Tyler's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Actually, yes. Could you send me the login credentials for the FDA portal? IT says they can't locate them in the system documentation. Because I had designed the system myself. Because I was the system administrator. Because the FDA portal was linked to my personal credentials as the company's designated regulatory contact. I'll have those for you by end of day, I said. I returned to my office and closed the door. On my whiteboard, I began mapping out what was about to happen. Tyler didn't understand what he had done, what he was about to lose. But he would. Over the next week, the isolation began. System access revoked one by one systems I had coded and maintained. No notifications. Just vague access errors when I tried to log in. Email threads about regulatory matters that once would have included me now circulated without my knowledge. My new office was a repurposed storage room near the loading dock. I said nothing. I performed my new duties meticulously, inspecting emergency equipment with the same attention I had given to million-dollar compliance systems. And I prepared. During lunch one Wednesday, I visited a notary public downtown. I prepared federal license resignation forms, not filing them, just having them ready. I backed up all company certifications, 38 certificates, all in my name. Section 8B of my employment contract stipulated that upon termination, all certificates would become invalid within 48 hours unless formally transferred. The company had never bothered to transfer them. Even as I accumulated more over the years, why would they? I was just the compliance person, invisible until something went wrong. 3 weeks into my new role, I received an automated calendar invite, Staff Reduction Phase 2, Individual Notifications. My time slot was 2:15 p.m. At 2:12, I closed my emergency supply inventory, saved it to the server, and walked to the small conference room near HR. Tyler sat with Marjorie from Human Resources, both wearing expressions of professional regret. Lena, thank you for coming in. Tyler began. As part of our ongoing strategic realignment, we've determined that the emergency supply management role is no longer necessary as a full-time position. I see, I said. This was a difficult decision, Marjorie added, sliding a folder across the table. We've prepared a separation package with 2 weeks severance, continuation of health benefits through the end of the month, and outplacement services. No personal meeting, no apology for dismantling the department I had built, just a folder and corporate platitudes. I understand, I said, accepting the folder. May I have a printed copy of the termination notice for my records? They exchanged glances, surprised by the request. Of course, Marjorie said, printing an extra copy of the letter inside the folder. I thanked them, gathered my few personal items from the storage room office, and left the building for the last time. In my car, I checked my watch. 2:47 p.m. I had exactly 48 hours. That evening at 7:12 p.m., I received confirmation from the federal system my voluntary surrender of all certifications had been processed. The regulatory clock had started ticking. The next day passed quietly. I updated my LinkedIn profile, began tentative job searches, and waited. My phone remained silent. No panicked calls, no desperate emails. They hadn't realized yet. At 7:12 p.m. the following evening, exactly 48 hours after my termination, the first systems at Virilia would begin to fail. Transactions would be declined. Data synchronization with federal agencies would fail. Shipments would be flagged. I slept surprisingly well that night. The first call came at 8:23 a.m. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then a text from Diane. What's happening? The FDA portal is flashing red with compliance violations. At 9:45 a.m., an email from Marjorie, urgent, please contact Virilia HR immediately regarding critical system access. By 10:30, my phone was buzzing constantly. I turned it off and went for a walk in the park near my apartment. The cherry trees were blooming, pink petals drifting in the spring breeze. I sat on a bench and read a novel for 2 hours, something I hadn't had time to do in years. When I turned my phone back on, there were 17 voicemails and 32 emails. The most recent was from Tyler himself. Critical situation requires immediate attention. Please call regarding licensing issue. Compensation available for consultation. I smiled and composed a single response. I'm unavailable for consultation. As per Section 8B of my employment contract, all federal certifications became invalid upon my termination. This was clearly documented in my department overview that was submitted prior to the restructuring. Best of luck with your strategic realignment. The chaos at Virilia was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. A supplier had refused delivery of essential materials because of invalid licensing. The legal department had discovered that no one but me had the authority to reinstate the certifications. They had tried to reset my accounts, triggering federal security protocols that flagged potential unauthorized access. And then came the FDA inspection. It wasn't a coincidence, it was the quarterly inspection I had scheduled months ago and marked on the compliance calendar that no one had bothered to check after reassigning my duties. Without valid certifications, without someone qualified to escort inspectors through secure areas, the company faced immediate shutdown of several production lines. By the afternoon, the situation had escalated to the board of directors. I know this because I received an email from the board chair, Ms. Ben Brooks. The board requests an emergency meeting regarding the current regulatory situation. We are prepared to discuss reinstatement with promotion and compensation adjustment. Too little, too late. 3 days after my termination, Gregory Lang returned from his sabbatical to find his company in regulatory freefall. Contracts breached due to production stoppages, federal agencies threatening fines, customers considering taking their business elsewhere. His call came at 8:15 p.m. as I was cooking dinner. Lena, it's Gregory. What the hell is happening? I placed my wine glass down carefully. Hello, Gregory. How is Helen doing? A pause. She's responding well to treatment. Thank you for asking. Lena, I've just spent 6 hours in emergency meetings. They're telling me all our certifications are invalid. That's correct. How is that possible? And why is your name on every single regulatory document we have? Because I'm the designated regulatory officer on all 38 federal certifications. as outlined in my quarterly reports for the past 11 years. Silence. Then, those reports that have no action required at the top, so no one actually reads them, those would be the ones. Gregory sighed deeply. Tyler said you were terminated for redundancy. Yes, apparently, I was legacy infrastructure. Another long pause. I never should have left that idiot in charge. Lena, what will it take to fix this? It can't be fixed. Gregory. Once surrendered, federal certifications must be reapplied for from scratch. The process takes approximately 4 to 6 months. Expedited processing might reduce it to 3 months with the right connections. 3 months. We'll be bankrupt in 3 weeks without production capability. That's unfortunate. Lena, please, there must be something we can do. Name your price, whatever Tyler offered. I'll double it. I laughed softly. Tyler offered me a job checking bandage expiration dates. Then he fired me from that. So twice, nothing is still nothing. I'm talking about real compensation, executive level. VP of compliance with direct board reporting, stock options, whatever you want. I considered it for a moment, remembering the 11 years I'd given to Virelia. The weekends worked, the vacations interrupted by regulatory emergencies, the gradual realization that my expertise was taken for granted until it was gone. I appreciate the offer, Gregory, but I must decline. I don't return to places where I've been burned, but thank you for confirming what I always knew: I was never redundant. I ended the call and returned to my cooking. My phone continued buzzing with messages and calls throughout the evening. I ignored them all. 3 weeks later, I updated my LinkedIn profile with my new position, Senior Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Chronex Labs, Virelia's main competitor. My inbox immediately filled with congratulations, many from former colleagues who had also left Virelia following the strategic realignment. Diane, who had resigned in protest after my termination, had already joined Chronex's research team. She sent me a text. Heard Virelia lost the Meridian and Novacorp contracts last week. Apparently, they no longer trust the compliance infrastructure. I also heard through industry channels that Tyler had been demoted to a nebulous, strategic consultant role with no actual authority. No company-wide announcement, no farewell party, just a quiet removal from the organizational chart. My new office at Chronex had windows overlooking the river, an espresso machine, and a team of 7 compliance specialists who actually appreciated the importance of regulatory affairs. On my first day, I found a note on my monitor. We know exactly how valuable you are. Welcome aboard. I taped a small sign to my computer where only I could see it. It read simply, I was the license. The first month at Chronex passed in a blur of new systems, introductions, and regulatory updates. My team was bright and eager to learn, a stark contrast to Virelia's dismissive attitude toward compliance. Here, regulatory affairs had a seat at the executive table. My opinions were not just heard but actively sought on major decisions. 6 weeks into my new role, we received word that Virelia had failed another FDA inspection. Their makeshift compliance team, cobbled together from legal interns and administrative assistants, had missed critical documentation requirements. The resulting violations would cost them millions in fines and at least 2 more months of production delays. Gregory sent me a personal email. We should have valued what we had. Congratulations on your new position. I didn't respond. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. On a Tuesday morning in June, almost 3 months after my termination from Virelia, I received a curious message from Maya, the intern who had been tasked with replacing my expertise. Ms. Brooks, I hope this message finds you well. I've been assigned to rebuild Virelia's compliance department following recent difficulties. While reviewing historical documentation, I've discovered how meticulously you constructed our regulatory framework. I would be grateful for any guidance you might be willing to share as I attempt to fill your very large shoes. It was the first acknowledgement from anyone at Virelia of the true scope of what I had built. I wrote back a brief but courteous response with 3 book recommendations and the name of a respected regulatory consultant. Not my problem anymore. At Chronex, I was already implementing improvements to their compliance systems, creating redundancies, cross-training team members, and documenting processes that had previously existed only in people's heads. I would not let my new employer fall into the same trap of depending too heavily on any single person, even me. "You're building quite the legacy here," my new CEO remarked during a quarterly review. The FDA inspector actually complimented our documentation process, said it was the most thorough he'd seen in 20 years. "That's the goal," I replied. "A good compliance system should be robust enough to survive any single point of failure." "Including the departure of key personnel?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Especially that, although I have no plans to leave anytime soon." "Glad to hear it. We know exactly what we have in you, Lena." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Verelia Dynamics announces restructuring amid regulatory challenges. The accompanying photo showed Tyler Voss leaving the building, box in hand. I put my phone away without reading further. That chapter was closed. In my new office, I looked at the sign still taped to my monitor. I was the license. After a moment's consideration, I removed it and dropped it into the recycling bin. I didn't need the reminder anymore. Neither did anyone else. 6 months into my new position at Cronex, we launched a groundbreaking new product line that had been stalled in regulatory limbo for years before my arrival. The CEO credited my department's work with saving at least 8 months in the approval process, a competitive advantage worth tens of millions. Meanwhile, industry rumors suggested Verelia was considering a merger or acquisition, their value diminished by continued compliance struggles and lost market share. Gregory had retired early, citing a desire to spend more time with his recovering wife. Sometimes, I thought about my 11 years there with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride in what I had built, regret that it had been so casually dismantled. But mostly, I felt vindicated. Not everyone who works quietly behind the scenes is redundant. Sometimes, they're the only thing keeping the whole operation running. I never did hear directly from Tyler Voss again, but I didn't need to. His temporary role had led to permanent consequences for him, for Verelia, and yes, for me too. But while he had lost everything, I had gained something valuable: recognition of my worth, both from others and, more importantly, from myself. In the end, it wasn't about revenge, it was about respect, about understanding that every role matters, that legacy infrastructure often exists for crucial reasons, and that treating people as disposable assets eventually reveals who was truly redundant all along. And it wasn't me. It never was. I am the license.